Good morning, Renee. It's great to see you again.
Good morning. How are you?
How is life? How is life in Florida?
It's very, very hot. There's a heat dome over the state. I think it's actually more than just Florida. And so, yeah, the weather's been kind of crazy. And even though people will say, well, it's always hot in Florida. Yeah, no, not like this. Like this has gotten like 119 degrees, 104, like really hot. Like it's
What's
serious.
119 in Celsius? I never know. It's like
Uh,
40 degrees or something.
yeah, like really hot.
Really, really crazy hot.
Yes.
That's why,
Yes.
my next vacation with my wife is going to be Norway. We are going
Oh,
for a week to Norway because it's north and it's cold. I
that's
mean,
really
it's cold there.
nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my husband and I watched the series Vikings on Netflix. So now we're obsessed with Norway. It just
We've been there once with Malgosha, and we've seen the Northern Lights, which was
Oh, that's
absolutely amazing.
Lois wants to go see that. Yes, 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 yes. That's
Absolutely
yeah.
recommend that.
Yeah.
Where you cannot see them now because right now it's going to be. I think we might hit like a full day. How do you call it when the sun never sets?
Yeah, like a 24-hour. Yeah, I don't know
24-hour day.
I don't know what the perpetual day. Yeah. I don't really know the astrological name, but yes, I know what you mean.
Anyway, we wanted to continue our Beyond the Batch series is focusing
Yeah.
on this couple of like the moments that where we are going back and reflecting on our journey through the exit, before the exit, through the exit, and after the exit. Um, we've already spoke about the first 2 weeks in the previous episodes. If you guys are watching
Yes.
the episode, there's a very interesting episode and very practical episodes about the first 2 weeks after you had the meeting, what to do and what are the steps that you should be taking not to regret it later on. We spoke about the identity crisis when
Mhm.
you actually exit and what happens to you when you don't have a badge anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
And last week, Renee, we spoke about my journey, right? So the,
Mhm.
the kind of a journey around this meeting and the emotional feelings, the what we call the grief, relief, or both.
Mhm.
I still find very little grief and a lot of relief.
Yeah.
I think I think you had a slightly different opinion, right?
Well, yeah, and listen, right? We have the perspective of 2 years out, right? And looking back, things when you're not caught up in the emotions and in the fear and in the anxiety and in all the feelings, you gain perspective. So I also would warn people not to misjudge, right? Where maybe some of our words, because we are now looking at this with a different vantage point. And that's the whole point of doing this series now, 2 years after the fact, because we have a clarity that we probably didn't have at the time. But honestly, Magic, even as I was preparing my own journey last night, to let me kind of step back for those who haven't been following us, we are looking at our experience after being let go or laid off or going through a workforce reduction that impacted us specifically. Our vertical or our industry that we work in is technology, very kind of large field, but small field, um, competitive, and also very volatile, constantly reshuffling and reassessing. And hopefully that will kind of give you some insight into your own journey. Interestingly enough, Magic, I was talking to a fire captain earlier this week, and he watched one of our episodes, and he
Okay.
was like, he watched the Beyond the Badge, the separating from the badge. In his case, he had a physical badge as a fireman, right? And he also works a lot with the police, and they have a physical badge. But it was very interesting how he was talking about the parallels of separating from his badge as a fire captain. And that inspired me and made me realize that a lot of what we're talking about is very universal in terms of different job transitions, even though our audience is largely in technology.
I can imagine that, and I can relate to that. I think
Mhm.
this is a pretty universal feeling. And when I read a lot of posts on LinkedIn, and recently
Mhm.
we've seen a lot of companies going through the whatever the name is, workforce reduction in case of our employer,
Mhm.
ex-employer.
Yep.
Uh,
Mhm.
it's going to be a similar feeling. So it is pretty universal, unfortunately, and
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully
But
hopefully
fortunately, yeah, hopefully the strategies and some of the things we're sharing as things that they can do, because we're also sharing some tools, some resources, and some those things apply as well, right? So, yeah.
okay. So I think let's talk about your emotional journey through
Mhm.
the through those couple of weeks. Uh, uh, Let me see. I think this is the slide that you had in mind, right? This is your.
Yes. I did more than a couple of weeks. I went a little bit beyond the 2 weeks. I actually went through, it's almost like a 3 month. Well, I started a little bit in February. I'll give you context and color because it's important to the story. But
Mhm.
I gave you a little, I gave the audience, I wanted to give the audience kind of a little bit more than the 2 weeks to kind of understand. Now we'll double click on some things in future episodes, but um, yeah, some of these things are critical, and I'll let you know why as I go along. Okay, all right. So one of the things we talked about in your journey, Magic, was almost like the pre. What are the signs before you get the call scheduled and the phone call? And I remember in my case in February, there was the reorganization. One reorganization had occurred, and the big portion that impacted both of us, and a new department or a new area was created, a new strategic focus area, and you and I were moved as us and our entire teams were kind of shifted and moved into this area under this new leader. And I remember my knowing full well that there would be layoffs and changes coming because we've been through this movie, we've seen it many times before. But I was very excited. The leader came from another part of the company, another part of the country. It was someone that I had worked with actually about 10 years prior, although the person didn't remember me at all, but I remembered the person. And so I thought it was exciting because it was an opportunity to focus on what in our industry we would call transactional business or run rate business. It's business that's very fast moving in tech and not necessarily big dollar projects, but more of smaller um, but consistent business rather than big projects, and you kind of get feast or famine. So I thought it was really exciting. What was also important, and it adds color to my specific journey, was that in that time my mom, who had been battling pancreatic cancer for 6 years, was in and out of the hospital, and she was um, kind of in she was losing her fight. The cancer had come back and we were going through a lot of change. So I had change in my professional life, and then in my personal life I had also a lot of change and things that were presenting a challenge when you're working with a new leader, because if when you have a new boss you have to learn their styles of communication, of decision making. You need to adapt to their vision, and all of those things require a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And so I probably wasn't in the best headspace, right? On April 18th, now I in this case I do put the date 18th because I think when I look back at, you and I talked a little bit on the first episode, well, in the second episode, about bosses that you trust or bosses that the difference in the experience, right? And I
Hmm.
remember I've had to be on the other side of the screen or the chair and be the one to decide when the employee needs to be notified and so forth and so on. And for me, the date was particularly devastating. The actual 18th of the month. That was when my 2 weeks were done and were off, and it's on the anniversary, basically on the month anniversary of my mother's passing every 18th. And so I took it particularly, it was particularly difficult for me. My notification was on August 7th, um, of that was the call. You had it on your timeline as the call, right? That phone call that you get that says you're no longer going to be with the organization. But what was really devastating was when I got my letter. You get a separation letter, for those of you that haven't been through this, with a timeline and things you have to do by when and so forth. And it was right on that 4 month anniversary or 4 month anniversary of the death of my mother. And not only was I losing not only was I still in the devastation phase of losing my mother to a
Hmm.
horrific disease. But, within 4 months, I'm losing a company that was not just my career of 28 years, but as I've mentioned many times to those who follow me, it had been in my life since I was 9 years old because my mother worked for the company for many, many years, and so did my husband. So it was really part of the fiber of who I was from when I was a little girl. And that was particularly jarring for me. And when I was thinking of the words, right, the words you used around, okay, that day of the phone call, right, I was relieved, right? I was really, and I was relieved for a couple of reasons.
During the day, during the phone call
The
itself.
the actual, yes, and I knew before the phone call that the phone call was coming. I remember speaking to the boss that I had before February, and I said, "Listen, I kind of see this coming. This person and I don't see eye to eye in terms of not just the vision, because I can get behind pretty much any vision, but kind of the tactical plans to make that vision a reality. Our communication styles were very different. Our personality styles were, so we were just clashing, clashing, clashing. And I knew, right, having been in this game for a long time, that that's not a formula for success. And I had been looking and applying for other positions beforehand. The company was going, this was, a little bit post COVID. So the company was going through a lot of different reshuffles, and the options were limited within the company. But I had a really good sense and that it was coming, because our dynamic, listen, I'm a behavior, my doctorate is in in human behavior. I'm a sociologist. I study people's personalities and nonverbal cues. So I was not surprised in any way, shape, or form. I also was very relieved because I knew that the fundamental differences between this person and myself were so profound that we weren't ever going to be able to make a good a team. We just weren't, right? I mean, and that's part of knowing yourself, that you're never, our values didn't align, nothing, right? And I was that's during the phone call, I was very relieved because I didn't want to continue working with this person. I was exhausted at having to walk around on eggshells, and I it was just extremely frustrating every day to come into work. So I was very relieved. I was hopeful still that because I was continuing to search and I had begun my search earlier. So I was hopeful that I could find something. And I felt really energized to look into, work through my network and find something else. I was involved in different initiatives, across departments. So I really thought I had a really good probability of landing something else internally, particularly because I had started searching before the phone call.
Yes, but obviously, that was not the time where there were investment areas and investment opportunities within the company, correct?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we spoke about in your case, right? You and I were already at certain senior levels that it's very difficult to find those spots. They're few and far in between. So
That is true. That is true.
yeah. So after the phone call, I was also relieved, not just from a professional standpoint, but I was relieved from a personal standpoint because I saw that this would give me an opportunity to really focus on my healing, right? Uh, any parent's death, I think, impacts people profoundly. But my mom and I were extremely close. My parents divorced when she was very young, when I was very young. So honestly, having some downtime where I could focus on my healing and adapting to my life after losing her, um, it was really something that I welcomed, right? And I didn't feel previous that I could take a leave of absence or anything because, when she died on April 18th, I just took like 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, right? And this is, I can't even begin to tell you, right? I should have maybe taken more bereavement, but the truth is that the organization was going through so much havoc. Maybe if I would have taken the bereavement leave or the leave of absence, because you can't fire an employee when they're in a leave of absence, right? Maybe, but I think these are choices you make, that you make the best choice that you can in the moment. I also want to share something about the picture. I chose these three pictures with a very specific intention. The first one, it's when we found out my mom's cancer had come back. I had our family photographer come to the house and take a series of pictures. And this one is of letting go. And our photographer she's beautiful. This was in our backyard. And that's kind of our goodbye picture. That was about a year and a couple of months before she passed. But we intentionally took that set of family portraits because we knew that she was going to start chemo again, and 50% of cancer patients have a reoccurrence, and it is unlikely that they can recover from that reoccurrence, particularly with pancreatic cancer. I'm not talking about all cancers.
Gotcha.
But anyhow, that was the meaning of, if you go back to the timeline, of pointing out that I I I don't think it was intentional, but I do feel it was careless. And I did feel a little bit like, no, knowing, having been a people leader and an organizational leader for a long time, and knowing how this process of letting people go, you can select different dates within a certain quarter. Um, and I generally would have.
There are waves, right?
There are
Typically,
waves.
and you can pick the wave,
Right,
and you can also, I think, and this is again this difference between the boss that will support you and the boss that will harm you.
right,
Uh, you can pick the date, but you can also pick probably, kind of a negotiate some or support the employee through this process, right?
right, right,
Uh,
right. Yeah, and the fact that this person, as a person,
mhm.
didn't care enough about me as a human being to stay away from that date of the 18th, and knowing that I had lost my mother just 4 months before. I wasn't, let me go a week before, a day before, but not the day of, right? That was, and that's something, that's one of those things that as a boss, they could have made a different, that person could have made a different choice if they had put a little bit more care and thought into the human being rather than just, whatever they were thinking about, and which I don't know, I can't judge it. um but it's one of those things where you can't control that, but it was particularly painful for me. It was almost like, um when you kick someone when they're already down, is the term that they use in the US, right?
And Renee, there was this kind of the reason why I'm happy that you're mentioning it, because there was this question in one of the episodes from the listeners that we should also look at the both sides of the picture, right? Not
Right.
only what is happening to an employee, like,
Hmm.
but also how this could be potentially managed.
Right.
I've been on both sides
Right.
more than once,
Yeah.
honestly saying,
Yeah.
okay. um, and when you are actually, you have to, as a manager, you have to go through this process, and there will be employees that you will have to notify.
Hmm.
There is a very important, kind of a mindset that you need to have as a manager. You need to respect the people. You need to kind of try to feel we acknowledge it is difficult for you as a manager.
Hmm.
It really is, for most of the people, at least. For
Yeah.
me, it was always a very difficult
Yeah.
situation,
Hmm.
and the one that I didn't look forward to the call either,
Right.
even when I was handing the notification over
Hmm.
to the employee that was impacted. But there is this kind of a mental process that you need to go through and think about it. Is it the right moment? What is the best time of the day? How to even this kind of thing can count. Okay,
Hmm.
is it better to do it on Friday before the weekend so the person can go back home and recover it,
Process. Hmm.
or do it on Monday when there's a lot of stuff that is going to be happening in the work, and a lot of questions that will be asked directly. So this is like for all the managers listening,
Hmm.
you have a very tough job,
Hmm.
and I acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, your position is in no way comparable. Toughness is no way comparable to what the other side feels.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, take this extra step, take this extra effort to think through how you're gonna go through this process, not only from the pure, uh, kind of a taking the right steps point of view, but also how to deliver those steps, how you're gonna walk through this, because that will matter. That will matter for people and for their future and how they are going uh, to move forward. And I'm not saying, Renee, that I've always done a great job. Probably I didn't. Probably
Hmm.
there are people out there that might say, "Hey, Magic, you could have done a better job."
Hmm.
I'm sorry. Okay, I was learning as well, or I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
recognize some stuff. Renee is much better than me in being emotionally and empathetic. I'm doing my best, but I've always tried. Okay, I gave it a try.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important because, the other thing that was a big deal for me is the company always, all 28 years and even before, since Bill and Dave founded the company, there was always a mantra and a value system within the company that, as we spoke in Beyond the Badge episode before, was, values that we lived by around, you treat people with respect and you treat people with compassion. And after dedicating my entire adult career to this organization, and the person that was responsible, or the person that that all of the people actually that were somewhat involved in the process of letting us go were not new hires to the company. These were people that knew the cultures and the values. Um, and so I'm not saying you should have, if you didn't think I should have continued, it's just that, to have kept me. It's just that something as small as changing the day, having made it on a different day so that um, I had lost my personal anchor, emotional anchor, and then the the only thing I was hanging on to, um, or one of the things I was hanging on to, was my career and my identity and my, that stability was what was helping me through my grief from my personal loss, and then to add that loss on top of it on the exact same day. That was the part. And that's why I put the date in. That's why I'm spending so much time on it. Because, like you said, Magic, as people leaders, when you're in a leadership position, you're going to have to make really difficult decisions. But you can make those decisions in the most humane way possible. You have to remember that your responsibility is first to the human being. As the people leader, that's what you accept. When you accept to lead a group of people, you accept the responsibility for their well-being, not just their job performance, because their job performance cannot be separated from their well-being, as much as people like to try and say that it can be, but it can't. The second picture and the second date was that date of the, and again, it was a professional regroup. It was the actual end of my 2 weeks, the 2 weeks that we spent so much talking about. My system access ended. And by then, that's when I was feeling those slightly different than the timeline. If you compare Magic's timeline and my timeline, that day I was feeling betrayed, cheated, exhausted, and sad, right? Um, Very, very strong emotions, because that 2 week period, the way in which it was handled was very also, we talked a little bit about this in the last episode. The person wanted to almost keep it hidden, not send an organizational announcement, not address it with some of my partners and my team. So not only were they managing to, and by the way, I think the person, I also feel like it's almost, I had this conversation with my husband. I honestly didn't have professional respect for the person. I wouldn't have minded being let go by someone that I respected professionally, that I was like, oh my gosh, this person is brilliant. They've got a brilliant plan. I don't, I I I know I don't fit in the plan. I can totally respect that. I had been in that position before. I spoke to you all about my previous experience with a WFR, and the incoming manager was fantastic, and he was bringing another person. I totally respected both of them very much. Had great working relationships with both of them throughout, even before that occurred. Um, and so I totally understood why he was choosing another person to go with. Um, and in this, so it can happen. I've had both situations where the person that's letting me go, um, even if it's for reasons I don't like or don't necessarily agree with, but I totally respect them. And I'm like, yeah, totally. I get that. Right. But in this case, I felt like almost like a lesser experienced, a lesser quality person was taking me out of the game, right? It was like it felt really icky. I know that sounds a little egotistical, but you know, I had worked the career ladder, meaning you to get to certain levels in the old HP. You had to do certain things. You had to go for multiple country assignments so that you could get experience in country, in different countries, understand different markets, understand different cultures, understand different policies, operation. Because when you operate in different countries, you have different tax implications, legal implications in terms of environmental exposure, employee exposures. So there were
Lifestyle.
lifestyles, yeah. And the other thing was, you used to have to go through different business units and also different roles, right? Whether you were in R&D and marketing and different types of roles, so that you were a well-rounded executive. And when you got to a general management position, you could look at the organization and at the world globally for what it was, with both tangible experience as well as intellectual knowledge. And this person didn't have any of those things, didn't do any of those things. This person was in the place where they ended up because of, you know, they
Whatever.
they carried favor with whomever. And so it was the way it was, right? And interestingly enough, right, 2 years after all of this, the business unit and the strategies, they're no in no better place, and actually they've continued to lose and decline, which doesn't bring me joy, but it's a little bit of like, I told you so, right? So yeah, it was a very difficult time, but honestly, right, that's just the way life is. That was the other big lesson from that, is life isn't fair. It's not fair for anyone. And it's
No,
not fair for, just because I had been there all my life, I wasn't special. I wasn't going to get treated any differently. And that was a nice big kind of reminder that life is not fair.
yes, and I've seen it again. Like on recently, there were loads of kind of messages on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
People with 30 years,
Hmm.
more than 30 years careers at the various companies. Your tenure is no protection.
Yeah,
Seriously,
yeah. It's
it's no
actually a
protection.
liability in many cases.
Um, Is it a liability? Do I agree? It's a liability externally many times because people believe that
Oh yeah.
you only work for one company, okay?
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, which is double unfair because
Yeah.
internally there is no protection and
Hmm.
externally it's a challenge. So almost your
Hmm.
loyalty to one employer for 30 years doesn't give you a special advantage.
Yeah.
Kind of a severance package will be capped anyway.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not going to get any extra treatment. No, you're not going to get any longer,
Hmm.
notice period, or you might get a little bit better chances in getting hired internally if you have a really
Hmm.
really strong network. Uh,
Hmm.
but the higher you go, the more difficult it will be anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
So
more
so
expensive you are. So if you're in a if the organizations that are around you are making cost conscious choices, someone that has 10 or 15 years tenure less than you is going to be less expensive, simply because they're in a lower level of the pay band, because they have lower experience. So another organization may want to hire you, but they may not be able to because their budget doesn't allow it. So that
so
creates complexity internally as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the message to you guys is, the fact that you've been with the company for many many years,
Hmm.
it's unlikely going to give you advantage.
Hmm.
So kind of take this aside. Like I almost don't
Hmm.
take into consideration when calculating your chances of staying during the
Yeah.
WFR process. It's not the numbers, it's not the performance.
Yeah.
It's probably other. It's probably where you are in the organization. Both Renee and
Hmm.
I, who were unfortunate to be in a space where, first of all, the company is making significant reductions,
Yeah.
and secondly, through the reorg, we ended up with a boss that wasn't really interested in keeping us in the organization. So it's kind of a
Hmm.
double whammy, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
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 So
Well, and that's why I wanted to also put the feelings that I put there, because no matter how emotionally intelligent you are, how
yeah,
prepared, like I was very prepared and anticipated certain things. But it's okay. You're gonna feel the feelings, and it's okay to feel them, right? And uh, now that I have perspective, I also, because I'm like, do I feel about this person and about this process the way I feel because it's a reasonable feeling, or is it because of how it was done, or is it because I'm still hurt, and now that I have time and distance, um, it could have been done so much different. It's not because I was angry and now I have a lot of perspective, and I'm very very grateful for the event itself because it really, as we continue, in a little bit I'll let you know, but um, it's I reflect on it and I still really believe that if the company that if the company is going to express certain values, it should hold every leader accountable for being a good steward of those values. And that's where my biggest betrayal was. It wasn't the person that did it because they were really just a vehicle. I felt betrayed by the company value statements that we were led to believe. I feel like I betrayed myself for maybe being a little too naive, right?
That's a difficult one. That's
Yeah.
truly difficult because in my case, the process was borderline standards of business conduct execution.
Hmm.
Standards of business conduct is basically, the rules. Uh, how do you explain it, Renee?
It's supposed to be a process where if an executive or an employee is not adhering by the company values, there should be a reprimand to whoever is violating those company values. And the reprimand could be as simple as a conversation, and as severe as a complete termination of immediate, employment. So.
Yeah. So in my case, it was an SBC non-compliant situation,
Mhm.
and even though I raised this to the company through the official company channels, that's the way how things should be handled. Everything was swept under the rug,
Mhm.
and I think that's something that, again, like, the process is a process. You have to there is a WFR process, and it will happen, but
Mhm.
yeah, you need to be very much aware as a that the rules might not apply, because I
Yeah.
felt almost like the company doesn't care anymore if it's respecting the values or not during the WFR process. So again, a warning maybe to everybody that's
Yeah.
listening to us. Uh, Not that I want to kind of complain about it anymore, because honestly saying, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter anymore.
Mhm.
But for you, don't expect that, the things that you have learned, like, especially when you cannot trust your boss, just make sure that you take extra caution, and be very careful about um, everything that you say, everything that you do, and move very, very, very fast with yourself in mind if you cannot trust your boss. That was
Yeah.
something that I learned during this
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah. And for me, the way I felt that it wasn't, I now see it as this person had very little experience. And because they had no experience in they historically hadn't had, you know, a certain size of teams and certain things. And so this person,
I,
honestly,
I
I
I don't
don't,
think it was experience, Renee. I disagree. I think it was just
yeah,
a lack of respect for others. Simply,
yeah. I know.
it was as
Maybe I'm
simple
trying
as
to be
that.
too nice. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
So
you're
I
trying to be
let's
polite. It
say it
was,
was both. Let's say it was both because I do also agree with you on some of the ways that it was handled for me. It was very disrespectful. Again, going back to the date, there were little things that were done mean spirited because the person just
yeah,
wasn't a good person, right? So
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
but our
Why
picture,
the
our
the
picture there
picture?
is that's our last discover. And as you guys can see, you almost can see Magic's little element in his lapel and his jacket. Mine is also, it's green on green, so it's right below my hair. It's hard to see it. I was also wearing my diamond element in my classic branded green for the company. Um, and we were in a very joyful place. This was when that SMB forum was done as well. So it was a really it was a beautiful, I would say, last discover, and it's filled for me with great memories of kind of because discover, usually for those that don't know, happens in June timeframe. So it was a very nice way to kind of cap a great career. So that's why I picked that picture. It also
We were,
demonstrates that we were very much living the badge.
we were,
Yes,
especially at Discover.
yes, yes.
Uh,
Okay, so
last,
zoom out a little bit more. Okay, December. And so some people might feel this is a little fast, but fast forward to December, and I that picture is at my first coaching client that hired me to speak at their sales kickoff in Tampa, and it was in early December. And that's why I called it my first stroke at my own clean canvas. And if you see in my screen, Clean Canvas Consulting is the name of our company. And I was filled with fear, but also wonder and of course growth. And growth sometimes is painful, but it's those things when we spoke a few weeks ago about the we. I used to always talk about HPE as including me in the we, and this was the first time that I was really in an event where I wasn't representing the company, the HPE company, but it was you know still very much in the sphere because it's a large manufacturer, and actually I still consult, and I'm at a fractional chief people officer for that company now. And HPE is one of our top lines. Our top two lines are HPE and Cisco. So it's still in my life very much. But we'll talk at a later episode really around the transformation piece. But I did want to walk away, and I always want to give you as a listener a few tools and pieces of advice. So, my survival formula or my resilience formula is really to get and accept help ASAP. Magic, as all of you know, my relationship with magic was a critical element because we helped each other.
mhm.
We kind of were like each other's support system. Um, and that was really, really critical to the bounce back. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the last bullet that I'm going to suggest. But the other thing is know your numbers. Know your numbers. What I mean by that is financially, it can be scary, but really look at everything in your life, because once you know the financial numbers, give you also how much time can you afford to be in certain places or to spend into other areas, right? Whether you're going to invest in a new area of training to get a new certification or to open a new company or whatever you're going to do, right? But you need to know your numbers around everything, because that's what gives you options, and it puts you in a position of power to make the best decisions for yourself and for your family. And the last survival tip is stay active and engaged. And this is where I'm going to loop back with magic. It wasn't just magic, but magic and I were in a very unique kind of place because we were going through the same, almost the same things at the same time. But we kept each other active. We kept each other engaged. We immediately got on and we recorded the 21 Laws of Leadership's podcast. And, we really just brainstormed constantly and learned. And as we were learning, we were bouncing ideas off of each other and we were growing. And so it was really keeping our brains busy and into the next things, whether it was learning a lot around AI. I know this is the time where I learned to use Opus Clip. I learned to use, it was the initial versions of Chat GPT. Magic took a bunch of AI courses and he would tell me, Renee, go take this one. So we really stayed very engaged in our learning and our evolution process. And that really keeps you in a really positive headspace so that you're not spending a lot of time kind of drowning in woulda, coulda, shouldas. Yet you're really spending time in a very productive way, and that really motion is life. They say that when you're, I remember when my mom was going through a lot, and staying moving, motion is life. And the moment you stay still, then you start withering away. And that applies not just to your physical health, but it applies very much to your mental health. So, with that, I'm going to say that our next episode, we're really going to focus on mental health. And that's the end of the piece of the journey for now. But I really thank you guys for listening. I encourage you to like, follow, comment. Keep sending your comments. Keep sending me your DMs, your comments on LinkedIn, your questions. Don't forget that you can book 30 minutes free on my calendar. It's on my LinkedIn profile. Magic has the same. Um, but yeah, I hope that this was insightful and it helped you a little bit. So, Magic, any other questions or thoughts?
Thanks for that. I think it's super important again. Now looking back, it's always good to kind of look back and reflect, and you look from a different perspective. And this perspective would be very important for me 2 years ago.
Mhm.
I think I
Yeah,
would really appreciate somebody taking me
yeah,
through what's going to happen and how
yeah,
things are going to evolve.
yeah.
And I remember, and I really appreciate where you are maybe today.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm talking to our listeners,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you probably don't believe or you doubt some of the things that
Yeah.
we are saying.
Hmm.
But 2 years from now, you're going to be probably recording a similar
Yes.
video like we are recording today. So
Yeah.
just take a
Yeah.
note of this, guys.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. We're gonna talk again next week, and
Yeah.
yes, we're gonna talk
It-
about the next
Mental
beyond.
health.
Yes,
Yes.
mental
Yes.
health.
Reinvention and mental health. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Later, bye.